This video started with my being extremely bored at a concert about 2 months ago. I guess I probably shouldn't mention the singer's name, but the singer was a 59-year-old famous singer from the 1970s. And in the program, she showed me she had listed a photo of herself that looked really young. So, oh boy, she looks really young. And then when I was listening to her, not a big show tunes fan, so I was about to fall asleep, but then I was looking at her and I was thinking, she's got a really full cheek. You know, why would someone with a very full cheek, which is something I enjoy doing in terms of making a face look rejuvenated, not look so good? I mean, she didn't look young, she just looked heavy. A large cheek is not necessarily a good attribute if that cheek is not balanced. But what about that cheek, if the size of the cheek was just present, actually made her look heavy instead of young? So I really looked at it. I looked at it when she was smiling. I looked at the way she was moving, and I started to really understand the element of heaviness. She was slightly overweight, and really what it was the lower aspect of the anterior cheek. So there was a video that I shot a week or two ago talking about subdividing this area called the buccal area below the central cheek. And what I really have noticed now is the lower anterior cheek, this almost of a stripe, can actually not convey youth, but actually convey heaviness and weight. So when we actually become overweight or heavier, it starts to sit in our lower face, and it becomes even more strikingly obvious in someone older than someone younger. Because what happens, let's take a step back and have you understand this a little bit better. Let's imagine someone 30 years old and overweight, and let's imagine someone 60 years old and overweight. Besides the concepts of wrinkles and gravity, why would it be almost immediately obvious that that person at 30 is overweight and that person at 60 is overweight? The reason for that is someone at 30 overweight is uniformly round and wide. Someone that is uniformly overweight, someone that is 60 and overweight has pockets of fullness and heaviness and pockets of emptiness. So the differential between a flattening of the upper face and the dominance of the lower face actually becomes so much more striking in someone older that there's almost an imbalance. Now you probably know that after having looked at a lot of the videos and started to conceptualize the safety elements of fat transfer, that if someone is really grossly overweight, 50, 100 pounds overweight, 150 pounds overweight, one, they're not going to be a good candidate for fat transfer for two reasons. One, just adding more fat to the face probably is not a good idea because it's already a very large face. Or if someone is actually just overweight, the problem with it, they're going to have fluctuations in their weight, and that can also be a risk in terms of fat, because fat is a live graft and can actually grow in shape and change. But what's interesting is someone just slightly overweight, maybe about 10 pounds, or they have a struggle with that very small differential of weight. Why would it be, in my opinion, relatively safe to work with fat transfer, and how could the fat actually offset the weight? How could you actually use the fat to make the face look slimmer? We talked in the other video about filling the buccal zone and filling the outer jawline. That really works well for someone gaunt, which is a difference of what we're talking about today, which is heaviness. How do we conceptualize a heavy older face? Again, it's the lower cheek, but also the outer lower jawline. These two areas that square off the face, these make a 4-point area that makes a face look very, very, very heavy. That is something that really, in my opinion, makes someone look older and heavier, but we can use fat to actually offset that weight. And how do we do that? Well, we try to bring back the balance where there aren't going to be these areas of marked demarcations of fullness and emptiness. But let's use a more specific example to make this more crystal clear. If the lower anterior cheek is dominant, what I do is I really focus to fill on the upper outer cheek right here and the outer cheek here. Unless they're just really wide, then I may just focus on the upper central cheek. By filling this area fuller, it creates the illusion that the lower full cheek is not as full. If that is not clear to you, perhaps I need to take another step back and reiterate a point that I've made in another video of mine, which is simply to think about the concept that if you have a glass of water floating on a television screen, and I ask you, how big is this glass of water? if there are no external reference points in terms of having an orange, an apple, a table, or something else that's sizable that you would understand to use as a reference point, it's why photographers always take an architectural shot with a person standing in it, so you have a point of reference to the ultimate size of the building. That's the same thing true with this analogy of a glass of water floating on the television screen. However, if I put a glass of water like this next to it, your brain sees the first one as large, simply and by virtue of its relative position to the other glass of water. If I make a very large glass of water next to the original glass of water, the original glass of water looks small. That's the concept of balance that we've talked about in other videos. So when I can actually bring the balance to the upper outer face, one, I soften the transition zone from a flattening and a big lower cheek, but I also bring balance to the face in the upper outer cheek so that that portion makes this area look smaller. Same thing here. If you've got a heavy jowl here, by adding fat to the jawline, which almost sounds counterintuitive and doesn't make sense, by filling the central anterior chin, your brain doesn't see the fullness of the outer face, and therefore not only do you see youth, but you also see a more balanced and more youthful face. So to summarize in quick summary here, that heaviness of a cheek, when a person has a full cheek, subdivide it mentally and really look, are they just looking heavy or are they looking youthful? And usually it falls into the idea that it's the anterior lower cheek, almost like a oblong stripe that occurs right above the fold, and the fold can sometimes get deeper and look heavier. This component and this outer part of the jowl, those 4 points are what, when someone looks heavy and full when they're older, but they don't look young. And that's not an area that I would put fat into, because that would actually worsen the weight and also worsen the aging.